My name is Julie Turney, and this is the HR Sound Off podcast show, the show created for HR and business professionals to discuss pertinent topics and trends as it relates to our professions. We're going to have amazing conversations with HR professionals from all over the world, get to learn their origin stories. How did they get into this profession? What do they love about being here? And how they want to set the record straight on that one misconception that really drives them crazy about our profession. Are you ready? I'm ready. Then let's sound off. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the HR Sound Off podcast show /
the HR Uprising podcast.
Oh, did you get that, everyone? So if you're listening to the HR Uprising podcast and you hear this voice, you know it's not Lucinda.
Definitely. And if you're hearing over there, you'll actually know that this is not Julie, this is Lucinda. So we're doing we're having a go at a joint podcast here in terms of exploring new ways of working together, Julie.
That's right. And it just goes to show that with technology and through COVID, that we're finding ways to collaborate on a global scale that just makes things so much easier for us to access community in the HR space, right, Lucinda?
Yeah, and it's great when we were just comparing notes earlier about how our audiences are really global, although, I mean, predominantly HR Uprising listeners tend to be, I'd say, 80% UK and maybe 20% overseas. Yours are the other way around. And so hopefully together we're reaching a wider audience. And you can open up that collaboration on a broader scale, full stop.
Absolutely. So I guess we should start by telling everyone a little bit about ourselves. So how about you go first?
Okay. So my name's Lucinda Carney. I've spent probably 25 years in people professional roles internally, and then a further 10 years in, God, that makes me sound old, doesn't it? Further 10 years working for myself with a business called Actus software, and we're really about building a better workplace for people, which I know that's where we have a synergy together, Julie.
Yes.
I've got a real passion about trying to make sure that there's better people management activities going on within the organization, and I think that's been something that has really been brought to light during COVID. My background was as a trainer, and I've ended up going back to that over the last couple of years. The beauty of technology like this has allowed you to do much more training and consultancy. Obviously, you've had the podcast. It's about getting great information out to people and giving people the skills and knowledge to operate in this strange new world that we work in. How about yourself, Julie?
Absolutely. So I've been in the people experience space for the last 16 years. I've worked in corporate for about 15 of those years, and I went solo last year. I started my company, HR at Heart Consulting, as a result of, my experience with HR burnout and just recognizing in the process of healing that I wasn't alone and that I wanted to do something to support my fellow HR community. And so now I spend most of my days coaching and supporting HR professionals who have lost their HR mojo, feeling frustrated in their roles, and helping them to get more understanding and more clarity on their careers and how to move forward in a positive way, which led me to write my book, Confessions of an HR Pro, Stories of Defeat and Triumph, where I share stories of HR professionals and our experiences of defeat and triumph in our roles as HR practitioners. And I also started hosting my podcast show, HR Sound Off, going 3 years this year. Where I just have conversations with amazing HR professionals to learn a little bit more about them and what they do and why they're here, why they're still here, and what we can do to just change the way we practice HR to make the workplace a better place to be.
That's a coincidence, because actually HR Uprising will be 3 years in May. So
cool.
Sounds like we've been on this journey similarly. And I wrote a book, came out a couple of years ago, but my subject was all about change. So again, I guess what we're doing within HR professionals, we're often dealing with the fallout of change. Sometimes we're the custodians of change. So my book was How to Be a Change Superhero, because actually, well, let's face it, it's not just about change. HR people really have to be superheroes. We have to have so many hats. We have to flex. I think the last couple of years has really brought that to light when you think about something would change, everyone's sent home from work, and all of a sudden everyone looks to HR to know what to do, to deal with that change, to come up with the answers and the resilience that people have needed. And hence your point though about burnout. And actually I wouldn't mind asking you a question. One of the things that I noticed, I did a few episodes on the podcast about, looking after yourself, the whole kind of concept of putting your own oxygen mask on first. And the really interesting observation that I noticed when I looked at downloads is that HR were really poor at looking after themselves, or certainly learning about that.
Terrible.
So what is it? What's your view, and how do you encourage them to do that self-care?
You're so right. We as HR, we're really absolutely terrible about taking care of ourselves. And I think to your point, I've come to that same realization as I engage HR professionals through my coaching practice. And I think it comes down to a couple of things. There's pride and ego, getting those things in the way, because we are the people responsible for taking care of the people. So, why would we want to or put ourselves in a space where we want to admit that we're not okay and that we do need help and we do need support? Then I think there's that lack of understanding of where they can go to get that support. So we create all these EAP programs, but then we don't participate in them. I've done surveys. The numbers show HR professionals create the programs, but then they don't participate in them. So simple things like engaging in therapy and those kind of things. HR professionals don't do those things on a grand scale. Only a few of them do it. And then I would say peer pressure is the other thing. I see all my other HR peers out here doing great, looking like they've got it all together. How are they going to perceive me if I admit that I am not okay and that I don't have it all together? And so between those three things, I think is a mixture of why we see a lot of HR professionals not getting the help that they need or the support that they need. When I am having those conversations with my clients or potential clients about self-care, I always ask every single time, are you eating well? Are you sleeping well? Are you taking, getting outside, getting fresh air, exercising? Are you doing those things? The answer most of the time is either no to all three or no to at least 2 out of 3. That they're not doing those things. And those are the simple things.
Those basics.
That's the basics, even if you're working at home or you're working in the office, do you take lunch away from your desk? So just get up from your desk, or do you bring your food back to your desk and eat and continue to work? Bad habit. You need to break that. Are you getting outside and just taking a little fresh air, taking an opportunity to kiss the sun or kiss the sky and just be like grateful for life? No, we're not doing that. Simple things like, how do you get your frustrations out? Do you journal? Do you record yourself, like make voice notes of things that are happening in your life that you're frustrated with? Do you have someone, an ally who you trust that you can share information with? And if not, then why not consider therapy or a coach, right? And a lot of times after asking those questions and watching people squirm in their seats a little bit because they're like, why are you trying to get so deep in my business? But I can't help you. The only way to get through is to go through. Mm-hmm. I can't help you if you're not willing to go through. So you have to get uncomfortable first. But yeah, just those 3 simple things, right? Eat well, sleep well, get a little exercise. I start there and then I progress.
And those things are in our control. Yet we often won't do them. And I mean, I reflect, maybe a little bit contentious, but I wonder whether some of it is, I would imagine the majority or the majority are female, right? That's the reality. A lot of people are female, which probably also have other hats on. So they may have kids, and there's a whole piece there where there's the job and almost naturally putting ourselves second, yet that whole adage about putting your own oxygen mask on first, it almost is even more important because so many more people depending on you if you do burn out. So how can you create that space and time to prioritize it for yourself? I mean, asking you, if you do that, do you do it, Julie? How do you manage to fit those things into your life? How do you make it a priority?
I make it so what I've had to do just to get into the habit of it is I create calendar events. So I have pop-ups that come up on my calendar for simple things like time to drink water, time to, get up and move from your desk, time to eat. I have those things. Yep. I have those things in my calendar. I always keep a water bottle on my desk. Right now it needs refilling because it's been a while since I drank water this morning. And then when I see that thing that says get up and move, I get up from my desk. I'm in the process of transitioning my desk because I want to get one of those ones that I can lift it up and stand up and work. So I haven't done that yet. So I want to do that. But right now I just get up, or I take my laptop and I move to the kitchen counter and I work out in the kitchen space for a while. I try to get out and, take a brief walk, or at least I have 30 something steps to my house. So I try to, even if I just go up and down the steps a couple times, I try to do that at least twice or 3 times a day. So different things like that. And then when I have downtime, I actually have downtime. So when I work a 4-day week, and I strive really hard to make sure that when I cut off on Thursday, I don't come back in this office again until Sunday evening or Monday morning. So I really am very conscious of
those boundaries consciously.
Yeah, not working on Fridays. I let my clients know I don't work on Fridays. So if you want something done on a Friday, chances are it's not going to happen. So if you don't get it to me by Wednesday and to get it actioned on Thursday, it's not going to happen before the following week. And I'm very focused and very adamant about my boundaries, right? Because people only do what you allow them to do. And the minute that you give people a little wiggle room, that they feel like it's a blanket invitation to abuse it all the time. That's just the way people are, right?
Yeah, it's realizing we're worth it enough to do it. But it is also about thinking about the consequences if we don't. I mean, I kind of put routines in, and the whole working from home thing probably triggered this, and I think sort of mental health dropping at various things. But the beauty for me was I wasn't going into London, let's say 3 times a week, so I wasn't having that commute. All of a sudden you've got 3 hours back in a day. Why not take some of that for you? Then it's about knowing your personality. Now I know that my personality is, and I, when I'm in times of high stress, I might wake up early and I'd sit at my desk, and I find that actually it was 9 o'clock in the morning, I sat at my desk for 4 hours, and I might have got some stuff done, but I was not feeling great. I feel like it's lunchtime at 9 o'clock in the morning. Whereas what I've started doing now, we have a dog, and I get up, and the first thing I do, I very rarely ever sit at my desk now. I go out, and depending on the light, I walk the dog if it's light enough first, so I get some steps going, and then come back, and I've signed up to an exercise class that you can do just with some weights and things. So I'll do 20-25 minutes, some sort of weights, not every single day, but most days I try and do it. I sit sort of 3-4 days a week. 3 days a week. I do a bit of weight bearing stuff and a bit of outside, and the walking the dog outside I feel is so important for my mental health. I realize now, because there's something about the fresh air, almost the colder, almost the worse the weather in some ways, it's better, but you still, if I then come back in, have some breakfast, sit down at my desk at 8:30, I feel so much better about myself, and because I've got it out of the way, and that the concept, eat that frog, get the hard things done first. I know that as the day goes on, the likelihood of me doing exercise is getting less and less. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon now. I can assure you it's unlikely to happen for me. The only other thing that I do, the only exercise that gets me out in the evening, and again, this is my personality, I know some people are better at times, is I play a team sport, so I play netball, and obviously we couldn't do it during COVID, because that's a team thing that will get me there because of the social aspect. So I found those things that I'm finding something that I really enjoyed, a team sport, but then just creating the habit of doing something first thing in the morning where I haven't even got time to think about it, make sure my trainers are ready, everything's ready to go, don't get time to talk myself out of it, and that's worked for me in terms of managing well-being.
That's great. I love to swim. So like I go to the sea I'll go to the sea, swim in the morning. I love early in the morning.
Let me just mention to the HR Uprising listeners that Julie's talking to us from Barbados.
Yes.
Not quite the same as swimming in the North Sea or off
Brighton Beach. I'm swimming in the Caribbean Sea.
I can see how that's tempting.
You know what I love about going to the beach early in the morning is it's the time that most of our older generation go to the sea as well. And I just love having conversations with the older folks when you see them go in. You watch them, they have this they're stuck to this routine. Every morning they go in the ocean. It helps them with their arthritis or, you know, just socialization. Yeah. And they're usually just a small set of old people on the beach, but just, you know, going, listening to them talk, engaging in the conversations, having a good swim out, swimming back in, listening to the sea, you know, watching it come up on the sand, and then just, you know, bathing in the sun for a little bit. It's fun, right? So I don't take that for granted. Yeah, I don't take lovely. It for I
don't know how conducive that to work would be though. I mean, how do you really get yourself on the beach?
You'd be surprised. I think here's a funny thing, Lucinda. It's like for people who live in the Caribbean, it's something that we take for granted. Like sometimes when you talk to Caribbean people in general and you ask them, oh, when was the last time you went to the sea? You know, they'll say, oh, I haven't been in months. Or, you know, I haven't been in a year. And you think to yourself, how could you not? You live on such a beautiful island. You should be in the sea every day. But I'm telling you, we don't do it. Sometimes months go by, weeks, months, years go by, and we don't get it done. But yeah,
that's a good point, isn't it? But that's the whole thing about us taking things for granted.
Yeah,
that we have. And that is a bit, you could reapply that to our point earlier though about you know, whether it's a lovely environment that we have and we don't get out and walk in it, or whether it's the fact that, you know, we can exercise, or we've got that time to do well, we have health,
yeah,
right, but we then don't eat well and to sustain it or drink enough water. Quite a good point in terms of human nature. We take for granted what we've got and you don't miss it until it's gone, until it's gone. So,
absolutely. And I also wanted to go back to your point about, you know, all the different functions that HR performs, because gone are the days when we were just the function that did the hiring and the firing. Now we're the function that does everything that relates to, you know, people experience, learning and development, talent management, recruitment and selection, and the list goes on. And I was reading a report that came out recently, I think it was by McKinsey, and they were talking about some of the positions that currently exist right now for HR. And there were two of them that really fascinated me in terms of like director of remote work. Would you have ever thought that we needed a director of remote work, someone to actually manage our staff who are working remotely in that hybrid space? And then I also saw a position that they had, which had me for a second, which was the chief worry officer. And as they talked about the chief worry officer, they categorized this person as the person who is managing the pandemic, from vaccinations to protocols for work, but they called that person the chief worry officer. I don't think the title of itself does not sit well with me, but no. It is truthfully what we're going through as HR, as we sit and either listen to our governments dictate what is going to be the protocol for our countries, and therefore if legislation changes, policies have to change in the workplace. And we are taking on the worries not only of ourselves but our employees, in terms of if people are anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers, and how the people who are complying and who are being wearing masks, being vaccinated, and how they're feeling about the people that just don't care. Like, we really are worry officers. And then I also read another article where I can't remember where I read it, but I just remember they called us the invisible first responders of the organization. And that really sums it up for me. Because if you think about first responders, you know, if your house is on fire and you don't have access to the fire service, you know there's no coming back for your home. If you have an emergency at your home that is critical, that could cost you your life, and you didn't have access to the ambulance service, then you know the chances of you dying are greater. Or if you had the ability to get yourself to the hospital, but then there was no access to doctors or nurses, the chances of you dying are just as high, right? But yet still we take for granted that when we have crisis in our organizations and we tap into HR and we think about, and we say things like, what is the purpose of HR? Or, HR is just there for the fun stuff. Or, HR isn't strategic.
Well, the invisible thing is about being valued, though,
exactly.
Isn't it?
No value.
Yeah. I mean, there's loads of points there that you could pick up. So your point about the chief worry officer, I mean, I can see that there's a role to play, but I don't particularly like the term. I think it's quite negative. If you think about, if you're doing a job advert, you want to attract the right people, and actually I'd argue that you want somebody who's attracted to that job. You want someone who's a problem solver.
Exactly.
So whether it's challenge or chief solutions officer would feel much more of a comfortable remit to me rather than chief worry officer.
Exactly.
So you want to attract people that are going to create solutions. And the thing about the invisible, well, I mean, that's an interesting one, isn't it? So do you think that we have a part to play, a bit like we have to value ourselves as human beings, as individuals, enough to look after our health and well-being so that we can deliver for everybody. But equally, we deserve to be valued for the contribution that we're making. While it's laudable to be contributing, we're not looking for the for the plaudits of contributing. Right. It shouldn't be invisible, because the problem is it doesn't get valued. And then if it's not valued, I think that has a knock-on. It's not just about HR professionals, it has a knock-on to the way we value people. And that is, when I think about a whole sort of building a better workplace for people, half the problem is the fact that people management activities, anything to do with humans, it often gets just deflected. It gets deprioritized in relation to the task. One of the observations that I noted during the pandemic was that suddenly it did become okay to prioritize people's well-being first, for people to be, are you okay, to be let into people's personal lives, to know about their family and their environment and things, and suddenly seeing us as whole human beings, which of course we are. And my concern, I think it would be a tremendous shame. I did a webinar last week where I think managers now need to be, say, pre-pandemic, it was okay to be pretty much purely transactional and task focused. And certainly in that environment, HR would not be seen as a valuable aspect. Right. During the pandemic, it was appropriate to be more people focused, and HR doing lots of support there. Whether or not they were valued for it is another matter. They might still have been the invisible emergency service. But now I really feel we need to be able to, well, certainly I think the successful organisations, and given that there is a talent shortage, people are voting with their feet, we're changing roles, the successful organisations are going to be the ones that balance. They don't just swiftly rebound and say it's all about task, it's all about transaction, just deliver. It's the ones that value both aspects of a people management role.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that as HR, we need to be the drivers of, let's not slip back into our old ways, but let's keep progressing forward. And when we see, leaders trying to slip back, then that we call them out courageously. We call them out and say, hey, look, we can't let this happen. We can't revert back to what isn't working. I think that a lot of, if we're going to learn anything from what we've experienced in terms of the great resignation and so on, and the great reshuffling and all of those things, then it would be people are at the forefront of this, right? And we now have choice. I think employees are recognizing we have choice, and HR in that mix is recognizing that they also have choice. And I think a lot of organizations now, if you look on the remote, like remote.co, remote.io, you'll see a lot of the remote jobs now are HR jobs, because people are recognizing that HR can be done remotely. It's about caring for the people, putting the right products and services in place with the right strategies, but it's not something that we can't do remotely. And we're finding ways to make that happen. And I think that if people or organizations take that into consideration, they'll realize I need to value my HR team now and have a greater understanding of what it takes for them to really function effectively and efficiently so that they can grow and thrive and be safe in doing that. That's going to include supporting my employees in the rest of the organization, the greater organization, everyone now being fully engaged and having a greater return on investment when we do that.
Allowing us to contribute.
Yeah.
In terms of a question, and maybe changing subject slightly, but it's all linked to it. I recently ran an HR challenges for 2022 survey just to find out what people saw coming through as the challenges. And I do feel that they have evolved over the pandemic and where we're going now. And I'm interested to see whether or not, the temperature check for the time for challenges that people are coming up for people in your area, the sort of things that started to come through. It's almost like it's gone full circle now. Whereas employee engagement didn't seem to be very important during the pandemic. Employee engagement appears to have re-emerged as a topic, but it's not in the same way as it was before, as in employee engagement prior was more about getting people to perform, to deliver their best, whereas I see it now as more linked to belonging and about retention, so people feeling part of something, people have become isolated. So that was quite a key area, and obviously recruitment and retention is a hot topic that I'm seeing coming through, and still management skills. Again, it always seems to be one, because we've never ever, well, again, we've talked about this, we don't prioritize people management, it's not modeled, we don't develop our people managers, etc. I just wondered, what sort of challenges are you coming across when you're talking to your clients or in the areas that you support? Is it similar or different?
No, it's very similar, but I would also add two more in terms of like technology and being able to embrace technology, being more agile in the way that we put products and services together as an HR function. I find that it's baffling to me that there are still so many organizations out there that don't have an HRIS system, that are still working from Excel or Google Sheets. I'm horrified, absolutely horrified by that, when there are so many other great options out there. Because
what do you think about if you were in sales, if you were in any other department in an organization, there's absolutely no way that they would be operating for it. I think that's just a case in point of HR being poor relation. And then trying to create a business case for people to pay for that kind of software
shouldn't have
and that actually is, and that is a classic example of how then we end up being administrators. So you can't add value if you haven't got the systems. If you're so busy just inputting content, you can't pull any data, you can't add value, you can't be strategic. It's chicken and egg.
You can't. You are so right. So like that technology piece is something that I see a little bit more of. And then well-being, obviously, like how do we, as we look at engagement and retention, we can't not focus on well-being. So how do we have the right products and services in place to support our employees from a well-being perspective? And are we considering everything in a more well-rounded way as it relates to well-being? A lot of times we focus on mental health, but do we focus on financial well-being? Because a lot of people are struggling financially. And so do we take into consideration helping our employees or supporting our employees where educating them on financial well-being is taken into consideration? I feel like that's one of the spaces one of the loopholes that we're actually missing. And then I would also add, from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective, and I think looking at the lens of understanding neurodiversity, and also from the lens of understanding, the kind of people that we have in our organization and what really makes people tick, what motivates people. So coming from a neuroscience perspective is something new that we're going to have to really take into consideration when it comes to how do we really support people if we don't know our people.
And that goes back to understanding people as an individual. and again, managers being able to adapt their style to get the best out of them. And it means that organizations have to continue to allow not a one size fits all, which it does mean that from an HR point of view, when you come down to managing performance and things like that, it's really tricky, because it's the whole pandemic and working in different ways and things like that has introduced shades of grey. So how are you fair and apply policies fairly? So it's way more complex, isn't it?
It definitely
I mean, I agree it's the right way to go. It's way more complex. Definitely the EDI is quite a hot topic over here. Again, some of it's to do with the inclusion aspects.
Yes.
And yeah, and I think it's about people feeling, again, this point of engagement and belonging. So if you join an organization, never see anybody, you know, it's actually feeling that you fit as well, and are part of something. So building, you know, inclusive teams, psychological safety, in terms of that's quite a hot topic that's coming through too, isn't it? So it's nice that it is good in many ways. It's quite exciting that those are topics that HR want to drive forward and that organizations have appetite for. Let's hope that they don't get paid lip service. I think that's the thing, we can do something real with them, and really make a difference with them.
Exactly. This is such a great conversation. Thank you so much, Lucinda, for collaborating with me today. I want to ask you 2 more questions that just relate to how I like to wrap up the HR sound off piece, and then I'll let you do the same thing for HR Uprising. What are you reading, watching, listening to right now that you think our audience would enjoy or benefit from?
Let me think.
And it doesn't have to be HR related.
Okay, so the 2 things that I'll do that aren't junk telly, that aren't Netflix. The one is I've revisited, this is a bit of an but it's relevant to what we've talked about. I've revisited a book I used to deliver training on, which is the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's the best-selling business book by Stephen Covey. And it's still so relevant, and it struck me when you were talking about the well-being. Whenever I do webinars on the well-being thing, I think of his 4 quadrants of renewal. And so he talks about mental renewal, physical renewal, spiritual renewal, and did I say fit and physical? Basically, so physical might be going for a walk, but spiritual doesn't have to be. Some people are religious, some people aren't. It could be about meditation.
Or mindfulness.
Your point on the beach about going an emotional, it's like socializing, making contact, and it's actually that moment having a bit of a problem, a bit of that lack of inclusion or that lack of belonging, some of the social bits missing. So people are almost not feeling like going back into an office. And mental is learning, and that leads me into something that I decided to do for myself last September. I took up a Hypno CBT diploma, so I'm learning about that. I did a psychology degree back, but I decided I was a bit bored, to be honest, and I just needed to learn something. And I'm not going to necessarily be I don't think I've got time. I've got too many other things to practice this, but I'm really enjoying learning something. And it's a great reminder. And the interesting thing about this Hypno CBT, it looks a lot about anxiety, and there's loads of anxiety out there, and how it's about the way we think influences the way we feel, and the way we feel influences the way that we think, and all of those triggers, and how can you choose positive thoughts, etc. So I suppose I'd say, I'm not saying everyone's going to go and want to do that course, but find something new to learn. I think, and actually I like one more, the third one is the learning thing that I did at the start of lockdown, and I signed up to one of these apps for piano. So I used to play piano as a child. Not particularly good, but I signed up to this particular app, and there's lots of them out there, so I won't advertise it, but it's been quite nice to learn to play, and it's gamified piano playing, which has taken me forwards way more than I would ever done as a child. So it's been it's just been good to be able to go and play tunes that I like, or songs that as opposed to just classical stuff, and feel that you're actually playing something that people could recognize. So I was thinking, this whole sharpen the saw, which is the renewal habit of Covey, actually walking the talk, making myself do that. A couple of those examples, I don't always do it, and I do watch lots of rubbish as well sometimes, but I go through phases.
It's okay.
That's what I've been doing.
Nice. So my last question, would be, what is the biggest misconception about HR that really bothers you, that you want to set the record straight on right here, right now?
That we're not strategic. It's absolute crap. And that is, it's the word strategic, I think, is sometimes it's almost like people are scared of it. They think that it's something mysterious, and it just isn't. It's common sense.
Yeah.
But all we have to do is we have to understand what the business is trying to achieve. And some of the time, some businesses don't know what they're trying to achieve. Exactly. So I suppose you could argue that we need to support the business and help the business to do that. So I think we are able to be strategic. It is common sense. We shouldn't be scared of it. No. And we have to have more self-confidence to challenge the business and believe that we can add value and help the business do that.
Absolutely.
So that would be my bugbear.
Nice. Thank you so much. Well, those are my questions for you.
Those are your questions. Okay, so my question to you is, what are you going to do in 2022 to make a difference for you? What are your goals for 2022?
Good question. I've been more.
Just while I let you think, just let you know,
I don't.
Guys.
So
totally
two things.
Each other on the spot here. So
two things I don't do. Right. I don't make New Year's resolutions, and I don't necessarily set goals. Right. What I focus on a word for the year. So every year I kind of think of like, where do I want to be? What do I want to do? And what is my word for the year? So last year, my word for the year was collaboration. And my word for the year this year is follow through. I've had the great experience of like working with amazing HR professionals all over the world. But one of the things that I'm great at starting stuff, and maybe that's because I have ADHD. Sometimes I have a problem. I struggle with follow through. So like if I have a great idea, but my brain triggers me on like the pain and the angst of how I'm gonna get there. Sometimes I may struggle with follow through. So follow through has been my word for 2022. And one of the things that I was struggling to start was group coaching. So for the most part, when I started my practice, it was mainly around individual coaching, which is great. But if you are an HR department of one, you need that additional support. And if you're struggling with creating your own community, it would be helpful that you're working with a coach who has the ability to help you create community. And so this year, I launched my first group coaching program to kind of support those HR department of one, HR people who are struggling to create their own community. And I'm so glad that I've done that. So follow through for me has been set the dates, get people registered, and put the program together. That's been follow through for me on one thing. The other thing is I want to be more vocal on advocating for self-care in HR and letting people know that HR professionals are not okay. And these are the things that we're struggling with. Organizations need to be more aware of it, and you need to reach out to your HR teams and give them the support that they need. And so this year, I'm going to be giving my first ever TED Talk on this very subject. And I'm hoping that it starts a movement of HR professionals starting to taking care of themselves and being okay with voicing it, but also with leaders recognizing the importance of checking in on their HR teams and giving them the support that they need to move things forward. So when you talked about HR not being strategic, one of the things that comes to my mind for me is a lot of HR people can't be strategic if they're not properly ratioed in an organization. So if you have one HR person to 600, 500, 400, 300 people.
And they're managing things on spreadsheets.
Exactly. And managing spreadsheets, they cannot be strategic, as we said before. And you're really not helping them, and your expectations are too high. But HR doesn't know how to voice that. And so when we're not voicing it, then we're internalizing it. It's messing with our mental health. That's not on. So I want to be able to, bring these things to the TED stage and help leaders and HR professionals so that we can strike that balance, bring some data to the fore based on some surveys that I've been doing across LinkedIn and other spaces on what is the real situation with HR right now, which is that we are not okay. So that's where I'm heading for 2022.
Good for you. Long overdue there. So you might have kind of, my follow-up question was going to be, I might know the answer unless you're going to come up with something fresh. I was going to say, you came up, what was your kind of goal for you? Or you said you had your word of the year for you.
Yeah.
I was wondering, what would you say the word of the year should be for HR professionals listening to this? And you can't say self-care.
I think the word of the year for HR professionals should be agility. I think a lot of times as HR professionals, we're so stuck in that space of we've got to get stuff done, yes, but how do we move things forward? And a lot of times we're not moving things at the progress or the rate that we should be because we're not willing to be a little bit more agile and being open to change and embracing the ability to pivot and do things differently. And so for those of us who are kind of like stuck in that space, which I think is a lot of us, that word needs to be agility. HR needs to be more agile.
Oh, that's a great ending. So I guess for my audience, I'd just like to say thank you. People can look you up, Julie Turney. I'll put your connection in the show notes. Host of the HR Sound Off podcast. So if you like a podcast, there's loads of back catalogue if they don't know about you, because you've been going pretty much as long as we have, or longer. I'm not sure when I'd work the start date out. But it's been absolutely fabulous collaborating with you today, Julie. Thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, thank you, Lucinda, for having me on your show as well. And I will share all of your resources that you've shared with us today and all your links on my show notes as well. So thank you so much. And I wish you and HR Uprising all the best as you continue to develop your show.
Thank you so much. And absolutely the same to you and your podcast listeners. Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us in the sound booth today. I hope that you found this information from this episode useful. You can find me on all social media platforms at I am Julie Turney. That's I-am Julie Turney. And you can find this episode or this show on most digital platforms, Google Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, you name it, we're there. Thanks Rock Solid Entertainment for helping me to put this content together for you. And I will see you again in the next Sound Off.